Welcome back, graphic design. So, you've spent the last 2 weeks getting to know Photoshop, understanding the different tools, understanding layers and layer mask, and a variety of different effects that you can create in Photoshop. Now we're going to use those things that you've learned, those different tutorials and things, and create our big Surrealism project in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and jump in and see what that's about. First thing you need to know, what are the requirements for this project? So you are going to create an original surreal scene, and we'll talk about what that means here in a minute. You need to combine at least 5 different images. So if you think about it, you're going to have like a main background probably. You're going to have at least one main character, or usually it's some kind of person of some kinds. But then you're probably going to have some other small things. So like if you look at these examples, you've got the main background, you've got the man standing here, and then you've got the tree, and then you've got all these different things hanging from the tree, and so all of those would count as individual images. Okay, so this has more than 5 here, but you need to have at least 5 images combined in some way, even if it's just a little aspect of your project. You need to use at least 3 different editing techniques. So some examples of those are editing the adjustments in like photo editing. You can do that at the very end to make everything look like it goes together, or you can edit individual images if something's really dark or the coloring's off. A new background or scaling, so playing with proportion. Double exposure, like you learned in our tutorial number 4, or any other effect that you've learned through other tutorials, maybe the ones that you found in our assignment number 5, or maybe you're going to find new tutorials to use for this project in particular. That will help you quite a bit if you want to try for that and do something different. So before we get any further, we first need to talk about what is Surrealism anyways. So there's a really cool video that's linked in here. I hope you take the time to come and watch it, because I think it does an incredible job of breaking down where Surrealism came from. But I'm going to give you a very quick little synopsis of what Surrealism is, and frankly, it's one of my favorite art movements, so I just love talking about it. So Surrealism is a response after World War II. It mainly started in Paris with a man named Andre Breton, and he was really responding after the war and trying to stir up social norms. So he was saying, like, before the war, things were pretty stuffy, and there was just, a certain way that everyone was supposed to go about their lives. And then war happened, and it was wild, and everyone was really stirred naturally from that experience. And then he said, hey, we don't have to go back to normal life. That didn't work. We ended up in a war, so what do we want to do now? And he played a lot on the unconscious and on our dreams. And that's where this whole concept of these surreal images that are like dreamlike and wild and kind of trippy and came from, is from him coming up with these different ideas. So he used this kind of art to create these like wild, usually paintings for him, to try and revolutionize what was happening and trying to make really big political statements, and change the way that society thought. Meanwhile, in Spain, there's a man named Salvador Dali, like you see here, the lovely mustache, and he is our most famous surrealist because he took it and he ran with it. He might not have been the one who actually established this originally, but he's the one who really made this revolution more concrete. He went forth and created surrealist images in every kind of media. So he did paintings, but he also did video, and he did sculptures, and he just kind of went wild with it. And he's the one who really then took it further with this dream reality. And so he was kind of a crazy guy. He had a ton of different pets. He traveled all over the world. He had an anteater and he had an ocelot, and he would say just like wild things, and he tried to convince people that when he was awake, as we know it, he was actually dreaming. And when he was dreaming, that's his real reality. And so he said that a lot of his paintings were in response to like his reality, which is his dreaming state, if that makes sense. Which it probably doesn't, but that was kind of the beauty of it. He was trying to really mess with just what is real as we know it, and really tap into that unconscious, because that had never been done before. This was a crazy revolution that they had, at least in terms of an art movement. So that brings us to a lot of the imagery that you see today. So here's one of Salvador Dali. This one actually features him. He was a character in itself. He ended up moving to America, and he moved to New York, and he became a famous personality. He was featured on what is now like our Tonight Show. He was on like magazines, and it's pretty wild for a lot of different reasons. So here's one image of like a dream-like state. You're probably most familiar with this image. This is the persistence of time with melting clocks, and there's a ton of different theories that go into why he has these melting clocks and how it's making a statement about decay on life, because you see all these little ants and these bugs and how time never sits still. The other cool thing about Salvador Dali is that not only did he make these really bold and wild statements, but he also was just an incredible artist. Okay, so his work was so incredibly detailed. Oftentimes they're not very big. If you've ever seen a Salvador Dali, I know there's many in New York, there's a bunch in Chicago, and usually they're pretty small, but the detail work is absolutely mind-boggling. He makes these things look real, even though they clearly are not something that happens in our reality. So now let's look at some more modern surrealist examples that have been done through Photoshop. So this is kind of a common thing to play with, because Photoshop is so good at photo editing. So you can have fun with it and create these really dreamlike, crazy, different imagery. So here's one artist, obviously taking the puzzle, making different statements through your art. So I'm gonna let you decide what statement each of these artists are trying to make, because I think oftentimes your reaction is really personal, and my reaction might be different from yours. Another wild one. You can see building imagery inside of imagery inside of imagery. This is an example of when there isn't like one particular little character, I guess, unless you count the mouth as a character. But instead it's really just like the whole build up and how everything's put together. Kind of crazy. I love this, riding a dinosaur to school or to work, you know, definitely have fun with that. This one's a little blurry, but this is a famous artist who photoshops together people and like little people with these larger situations. So mowing the lawn. Here's some more that we already looked at, but a little bit closer view. There's actually a tutorial walking you through some of these, like this one in particular. She's laying on a chair to be able to create this pose, and she is not at all in this setting. And so they show how to get rid of the chair and separate her from it and put her on this new background and create a cast shadow and make it look like she's just kind of hovering there. So it's pretty cool. This one's a little blurry, but once again, playing with scale. That's a pretty common thing in these surrealist images, is making someone either incredibly large compared to the surroundings or incredibly small. So that's one option for you on how you can interact with this. It's pretty awesome. Putting together this road with the swimmer. Some other interesting imagery. And now when you go to create your images, make sure you're pulling from images that you already have in your digital portfolio. If you have an idea for something that you don't have images for, then you can take new images, or you can go to those free online stock photo websites. Another one. I love this one. It's a popular one. Another one, playing with scale. Believe it or not, the cat is not actually that large. I know. Once again, lots of images put together. I love this one. So you can go back in here and take some time looking at these a little bit further. You can also just look up surrealist images. There's a lot of these are from professionals and they're found online. A lot of them are series. So as you can see, like the Little Red White Riding Hood series is one. Once again, playing with scale. Okay, here is a famous artist, and there's actually a link to an article about him. Pretty incredible. So he plays with creating these little scenes with usually food or objects. He's the one I was referring to. Pretty cool. Okay, let's look at a few student examples. So here's a student example. As you can see, she's putting together different imagery to create this mystical, exciting, almost candy land. She added this like red down here. She has her landscape. She added her little gummy worms and then lowered the opacity to make it look like the gummy worms are actually floating in this water or this candy water. She added her cupcake. She replaced the moon or the sun with a donut. She added her own little stars. Pretty cool. Here's another one. You've got a little different background holding this heart and these ladybugs traveling all over. Lots different happening there. I love this one. This is him. This is Aiden who created this one, and he put together a bunch of different images. He started with, he actually had me take an image of him while he was laying on the floor, and then he chopped himself up. No big deal, and added all these other imagery and his background. Totally wild. I love it. Here's another one of Aiden because he just kept going to make it look like he's interacting with his laptop. Pretty cool. Once again, he just posed for this and then cut himself out, took this other photo, and put them all together. Here's another one. Doing that double exposure effect. Okay, so here's what you need to do. There's a few steps to help you brainstorm. The first one is to do something called automatism, and that is basically like a free write. It's referring to trying to tap into your unconscious, into your subconscious, to be able to not just to not think, which is kind of wild, but that's really what Dali would have tried to do. Okay, so this image shown is something created from just drawing and not thinking. But what I'm going to have you do is get out your sketchbook, or you can do this in a document. And I need you to respond to the following prompts. So, and do this, go ahead and set a timer. Give yourself at least a minute or two on each of these. The first couple ones probably only need a minute. The last ones probably need at least a couple minutes. And challenge yourself to really write that entire time. Okay, you need to write through that minute. Don't just answer and then move on. Actually sit there and just keep thinking and keep writing whatever is coming to your mind, whether it makes sense with that prompt or not. Just keep going. And that's kind of the whole point of this, is because we're trying to get past what those initial responses are. We're trying to jump into your unconscious. Okay, so how are you feeling? What do you dream about? Okay, have you had any weird dreams? Any dreams where you're floating, or where like the situation was just really wild? Those would be great ones to use for this. And so try and think back and write down all of those that you can think of. If you could be mini for a day, what would you do? So playing with that scale, what would you want to do? And then on the reverse is if you could be giant for a day, what would you do? And then something that we talked about a couple weeks ago that you guys had awesome responses to is if you could have any superpower, what would you choose? Okay, so you can write more about that, and that would be something that you could absolutely try and show through the surrealist image. So once you take some time to write that out, that's step one. Then you're ready for step two, which is our brainstorming assignment. Okay, and so now you're trying to figure out, well, what story do I want to tell? So you're going to go and look at what you wrote down, and you're going to come up with 3 different main topics. We're calling these injustices because sometimes it's easier to think of it that way. And then if you can answer through these questions underneath, then it will help you be able to make sure that this is going to work for this assignment. So let me show you an example of this. Here it is. Injustice number 1, having to ride the bus to school. I never really loved riding the bus personally. I don't know about you. And I know most of you are not doing that right now. But when you did have to do that, you could have fun with it, make it more comical, make it a big problem. And then objects you could use, you could incorporate a bus, you could incorporate a dinosaur, like this image right here, a private jet. And the idea could be a mini-me rides a dinosaur instead of a bus. So here's our solution to that. Something more like trying to make a statement. Tigers are losing their habitat. And so serious problem, big problem, tiger habitat, poachers. And you could end up with a person befriending the tiger and like joining them, walking hand in hand in their habitat. So a couple different examples of how to fill that out. Make sure you do fill that out completely. Hopefully one of those will be what you end up using, and submit that as your assignment in Schoology. Then, now that you have your idea figured out, you're ready to actually open up a Photoshop document and get started. Now, you need to use those different tutorials and things that you've done previously to be able to figure out how to create whatever image you're trying to create. Okay? Just make sure you're meeting those requirements of creating your original surreal scene. So make sure it's original. You need to combine at least 5 images. And you need to use at least 3 different editing techniques of some kinds, okay? And you will end up telling me what those techniques are when you turn it in. When you are all done, you are going to save it. Always save it as both a JPEG and as your Photoshop documents, which is what it defaults to, so that you can go back and edit it if you need to. You're going to submit that JPEG image to your final project in Schoology, right above where your self-reflection is, and then you're going to fill out your self-reflection like we've done before. So make sure you fill out for craftsmanship, for creativity. Skill application is where you're going to talk about your 3 different techniques that you used, or more than 3 techniques. And then growth, did you try any extra tutorials that weren't on there already? Did you push yourself with this? If you have any further questions about how to fill out the self-reflection, I have that video of me walking you through a self-reflection linked here. Okay? And that's it. You're also going to put it on the class share media album. I'm sure people are going to want to see this. So here it is. Make sure you click on that and just upload that as well. But I will be grading it from the final Surrealist project here. Okay, this is due on Tuesday, and I can't wait to see what you do.